Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Thank you, Jim. My name is Ken O'Brien, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank you for inviting me up here, and my wife Donna and I both want to thank our leader Jim and his wife Kathy for their hospitality. It's been marvelous. We've really enjoyed our visit up here. I feel very much at home up here. I don't know, since my name is O'Brien, maybe it's the bingo sign behind me that makes me feel so comfortable here. I was up here a couple of years ago, I guess, and things have changed. I'm still sober and still learning and still hanging out with these A&A people they talk about. So among the changes is a wife that I didn't have when I was here before. And one expression in Alcoholics Anonymous that I do not like, a lot of expressions I don't like, but one in particular I don't like. It's people who go around talking about their babies. Babies, my baby this, my baby that. I personally like to work with adults. You know? Anyway. So when I refer to people that I have the privilege of sponsoring, I will say so-and-so I work with. And I don't want any babies. Well, I overlooked something. I got married a little while ago. And there sits my bride, and I'm going to have a baby. But this will be the... Actually, sobriety doesn't carry that far. She's going to have the baby. So there she sits, light with child, and we have one of these books at home on the coffee table which tells you every revolting development that's taking place with that baby from I mean, it really tells you more than you ever wanted to know, and, on a moment-to-moment basis. And we've been following the baby's progress and finding out what's happening now, and this is the week that the fingers come, and this is and that is a double-edged sword, because a couple of weeks ago I was going out, and I said, Donna, while I'm out, would you mind, I need a laundry done. She said, I can't possibly do it. I'm making ears today. So, it's a privilege to be at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't just say that. It really is a privilege. And I know that to be invited to share one's experience, strength, and hope is really a privilege. And I pay strict attention to that. And when I sit there and remind myself, as Chapter 5 is being read, I have developed the habit of listening to Chapter 5 each time that it's read, because I'm going to hear an inflection or a nuance. I'm going to hear something different almost each time. That's why I like to read the book a lot, too. Something keeps popping up that I hadn't seen the time before. And the one particular step that I love to pay close attention to as Chapter 5 is being read, if I'm going to be sharing from a podium, is that 12th step. And that 12th step, as you know, says, having had a spiritual awakening, as a result of these steps, we tried to carry... Now, if I were going to ask you what the next word was, you might say, we tried to carry the message. And it doesn't say that. What it says is, we tried to carry this message. And that, to me, is a very significant word, and it's a very important difference to me. Because when I get up at an AA podium, I don't think I have the right to waste your time with the message which might be mine. I don't have any right to get up and bore you with my homespun philosophy, or the latest cult that I've been captured by, or, you know, my adventures with transcendental meditation, or oriental constipation, or any of the other things that go on. I have an obligation to stand here, and it's a privilege to stand here and tell you what God has allowed me to experience since I've come into Alcoholics Anonymous as a sober alcoholic. And that's what I'll try to do tonight. And I'll probably talk just enough about what it used to be like so that you know that I didn't show up here as a social climber. And I can tell you that I come by my disease honestly. I am at least, to the best of my knowledge, I've been able to track back, I'm fourth generation alcoholic. And so I did not get here because I got hung up on Twinkies. Or when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, if you said you were a poly addict, they thought you were queer for parrots. So I don't know from that. So I'm not going to get off into that bag tonight. What I'm going to tell you about is what has been going on with me as an alcoholic, some of the things that I know and some of the things that I think I know. I will be honest with you, and whether or not it's the truth, only time is going to tell, but I will be honest with you. Those honest opinions seem to have a way from time to time of changing. Not too many of them change. My wife will testify. I found that Alcoholics Anonymous has been for me an unlearning experience as much as it's been a learning experience. When I came in, you had to shake loose a bedrock of granite that ran from here to here and say, hold it a second, you know all that stuff that you know that's causing you so damn much pain? What causes you pain is stuff that you know that simply isn't so. And before we can replenish some of the garbage that you have up here, we're going to have to shovel that stuff out. Now, you either let go of it willingly, or God in His infinite wisdom will let you experience things which will just beat the bejesus out of you, and you will be happy to let it go. Okay? And there are still occasions where I didn't want to let it go. And have you ever tried to come up against obviously superior strength and say, I'm going to hold on? What happens? It gets taken away, and sometimes fingers get taken away with it. It's not a very graceful procedure. So what sobriety has taught me is to kind of let go real quick. Drop it. Let it go. I don't believe that the third step tells me that every waking hour of the day I have to say to my Almighty Father, I turn it over to you. It's yours. It's yours. Anybody here rent a house or an apartment? Anybody rent? You do. Okay, thank you. Do you call up the landlord every hour of the day and say, by the way, the house is still yours? No, I don't do that. No. He knows that. You know, oh, what are you, nuts? I know that. What are you up to down there? Yeah, I know the house is mine. And so, as I say, I was raised by, I didn't say that, but I said I'm fourth generation. I was raised by two alcoholic parents, one of each side. And my father died at the age of 40 of our disease. My mother survived him and drank for a few years more and then came into the fellowship, and to this day she is a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous with some 24 years of sobriety. And it was God's grace which enabled me to watch her I watched her like a cat, because I was still out there doing it, to see what was going on and to see if it would work for her, and maybe if it worked for her, it might work for me. Because I had been surrounded by alcoholic behavior. In addition to my parents, my grandfather certainly was alcoholic, one of the most colorful drunks I've ever known. It caused me some resentment when I came into AA, because there he was, knocking off as much Irish whiskey as he could beg, borrow, or steal in the course of a day at the age of 80. And here I was at 26 saying, what the hell, I just got ripped off for 54 years, you know? He just... His mother lived with us for a while. We had one of those very successful alcoholic families. We had myself and my two brothers, my parents, 5, my grandparents, 7, my aunt and my cousin, 9, and my great-grandmother all living in a 1.5 bedroom house. That's because they all handled their drinking so well. And we had so much cirrhosis in that family that I was about 11 years old before I figured out I wasn't Oriental. In other words. And I couldn't wait to join. You know, I figured, what the hell, if they're willing to die for it, it must be great. When do I get mine? You know? And one day I had an opportunity to chat with my great-grandmother when things settled down, and we're a very family-oriented bunch, and something dawned on me, and great-grandma was then up in her 90s, and I said, Grandma, no one ever talks about your husband. She said, that's right, we don't. And I said, well, how old was he when he died? And she said he was 25. And I did some fast arithmetic, and I thought maybe we had a Civil War hero in the family, which was ridiculous because I came from a long line of draft dodgers, too. And I said, what was it that killed him? And she said it was the curse. I mean, I knew right then and there she wasn't talking about the menstrual cycle. You know? Because in my family, we call that the blessing. You know? And so I watched them dropping like flies, and you know, it was very strange, and you thought that there had been an argument in the family when one of the men went out in the morning. It never occurred to me that they might be going to work. It was just something that didn't get done in our house. So in terms of role modeling, I was all set. Now, I'm not going to stand here and lay any of my alcoholism on the doorstep of my forebears or on that environment, because I have two kid brothers who were raised in that same screwball environment, and neither one of them is alcoholic. So you can forget about that. Of course, one drinks wine before breakfast. But it's all right, he's a Catholic priest. He can do that. I wonder, though. I wonder. So I don't think that I have to stand up here before anybody and explain how I came, you know, why I came to have my disease. If I were diabetic, I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time trying to figure out why the hell I became diabetic. I'd say, well, let's see. Maybe what I ought to do really is stay away from Hershey bars for openers and take it from there and address my situation, address my disease. Diseases don't need apologies. And yet I find one of the amazing things as we work with new people, and I don't have a whole lot of patience with that kind of stuff. Giggle, giggle, says Phil in the front row. Getting into a lot of lengthy explanations of why, who cares why, you know? And so I sometimes have a tendency to be a little short with people, and I hate whining and sniveling and knock it off, crying out loud. You know, whatever happened to men in this program? And days of wooden ships and iron men and all that good stuff. And one day I was reminded of this a couple of months ago. Someone said, you're mellowing a little bit. You're not like you used to be with new people. And I thought, God, I hope not. I hope I'm not mellowing. Maybe I'm losing my edge. And I was reminded of a fellow that I picked up on a 12-step call. And this guy immediately started to set me up. He was coming down. He was coming off a drunk. And he was telling me that what he really needed was to be put into a hospital because he had DTs and convulsions, and that's what he had to do. And I said, don't give me that crap. I've had that too. I didn't get any damn hospital. You're just going to go to a meeting. Come on, get in the car. We're going to a meeting. And the guy was shaky. And I was kind of watching him out of the side of my eye. And I was driving a beat-up old 1968 Fiat Spider. This thing just was held together with glue, you know. And we chugged along, and we got to the meeting, and the guy's, you know, he's giving it one of these in the car, and I say, well, you knock it off and stop your damn complaining. The hell's the matter with you? You know, I'll be all right. And every now and again, I'd say, well, you cut it out. You're not going to a hospital. You're going to a meeting, and then we'll talk about a hospital. So I stopped the car, and I waited for him to get out. I said, will you get out of the car? We're ready to go. He said, I'll be there in a minute. I'll be there in a minute. I said, what the hell are you doing? And I look around, and he's got his shoe and sock off, and he's wringing out his sock. I said, what's the matter? He stared. It turns out that my hot water heater was leaking boiling hot water on the poor guy's foot. And I'm saying to him, knock off your sniveling. You have to go through a little pain if you want to. Can't you just say... Guy's probably saying, what the hell kind of bunch is this? They make you put your foot in boiling water to get sober? And then I say to him, if you want what we have, you know, who knew? Forget about it. I'm all over the place tonight, so you're going to drop a trap door or something when it's time to get down? Right, okay, good. So let me get back and do a little bit of qualifying and tell you that my first experience with alcohol obviously was as a member of a family that was just consumed with alcoholism. My own personal experience came on VJ Day, which is 1945, and I'm looking around here. I better tell you, VJ Day was the end. It was the end of the war, the Second War. You know, over there and all that stuff. And there was a block party, and I was 10 years old, and I got blotto. And I loved it, and I got into a blackout, and I discovered that I was not the polite kid that everyone thought I was, and I sensed a tremendous freedom in telling the neighbors precisely what I thought of them. Right out. And they thought it was cute. And the next morning, I didn't think it was cute. There's probably nothing more atrocious than a 10-year-old with a beer hangover. And I made that prayer that I learned instinctively. No one has to teach us how to say that prayer that I said 100 times, 1,000 times after that, and it goes something like, "Dear God, please get me out of it this time, and I will never do that again." Right? And next couple of years, no problem. And I was sent away to a camp to be a counselor to work that summer at the age of 15. And I got into daily drinking and loved it, and used alcohol to deal with everything and loved it. I am not one of these people you hear say, "Well, I hated the taste," and I love the taste. I love the smell. I loved everything about it. And I started to drink, frankly, for the same reason that probably one of the reasons that I decided that I had to try to stay away from the first drink. I wanted to be a man. That's why I started to drink, and that's one of the things that made me decide that maybe I'd better check out this AA stuff, because once again, I wanted to be a man instead of the sniveling puke that alcohol had made me. So in between the time that I was 15 and the time that I descended on your doorstep, I went through any number of things. I got bounced out of a major seminary for drinking, for jumping the fence and drinking on a daily basis. They frowned on that. No sense of humor, those guys. I blew a career as a professional ball player, a one-year career, but a career. And I learned how powerful the English language is, because when they wrote in my file, they came out to scout me, and I was loaded that night. And they, too, had lost their sense of humor. And they didn't say O'Brien was drunk. They added one very powerful letter that people use when they describe us. They said, and the letter they added was A. They said O'Brien is a drunk. And I learned the tremendous potency, the difference between being drunk and being a drunk. Big difference. And so that went out the window. I went to work for any number of companies in New York City. I decided to become a salesman because they get put on expense accounts and are rewarded for booze. We paid to drink. And my philosophy was simple. I figured that New York City probably had 5,000 companies that needed salesmen, and if I could put in a week with each, the hell, grab a check, get on a bender, get another check, go on another bender. You know, they say more will be revealed to you when it's not always pleasant. And not long ago, I was putting together the last year, and I knew that I came into AA the last time so far, in July of the year. And in that 7-month period, I had worked for 7 different companies. And I was trying to figure out the 7th, and suddenly it came to me. The company 3M had a division of Thermofax, and they had these damn copy machines. This to just give you a style of my logic and my intellectual skills at that time through drinking and how I was able to use drinking. And they gave me a territory in the Wall Street district of Manhattan, and my job was to take a big machine around that was about that high on rollers and bring it around and try to interest offices in buying this Thermofax copy machine. Now at that time, Manhattan was under a lot of construction, and at each intersection they had big wooden horses. You had to walk up 3 steps, over a platform, down 3 steps. So I take this goddamn machine out, and I'm walking down the street, and I get to the first corner, and I have to lug that thing up and over and down, and I get to another corner. I had to do it twice before I got to the up and down. And I thought, wait a second. There's got to be a better way to do this. You'd be amazed at how many of my life's severe problems started out with that statement. Wait a minute. There's got to be a better way to do this. What I need to do, and it's by about 5 after 9 in the morning, what I need to do is sit down and get my wits together and plan how I'm going to handle this. Now, I don't know about you, but I do my best planning in bars with a drink. Settles me out. I get some real clear thinking. So I found a bar called Child's in Manhattan, and I sat down and I had a couple. And after about the 3rd drink, the thinking just started to roll. I mean, the genius was obvious to me as I looked in the mirror. The thoughts were flying. The Wall Street district was now my empire. And it was 10:30, and I thought, look, if an hour and a half of planning will get me that kind of results, what, another hour and a half, and I'll be president of this outfit. So at noon, the office of that company on Church Street in Manhattan, the doors opened. They had big double doors, and they had a ramp leading from the street right down into the sales manager's office, the ramp so you could wheel your machines. And at noon, the doors opened, and I stood there, and I kicked the machine down the ramp and through his office, because I had planned that sales activity so well, I didn't need them or anybody. Okay? I was going to do it without them. So there was a job that I spent 3 hours on. And that, you know, if I spent a week or more than a week on a job, I was disappointed when I didn't get a gold watch. Was it something I said?
Excuse me a minute.
Yeah.
Could you ask for Adele to come forward for a minute, please?
Forward or out there?
Well, out there.
This gentleman is looking for Adele. It would seem Adele is not looking for you. We're on the bees now. Is the Rabbani here? Carol, you ready?
We've got a problem outside. It's real funny.
My wife's name was Donna. You had to go. This reminds me of a meeting when I spoke down in Laguna a couple of years ago, and I stood up there and somebody came up and said, if anybody here is parked in that parking lot, the police are here and they're towing cars. I mean, people walked out of that room who didn't come in a car. I know this thing. Can't fool me. I hope it's nothing serious. Anyway. Well, Carol's back. Good. What the hell do you want now? I love participation meetings. Phil wants me to tell you the bus is leaving for Reedley. And I'm driving it now. So, at along about this time, I met a young lady, and I was sort of in between lives at that point in my life because I had been bounced out of job to job to job to job. And this is prior to my last coming into AA. This is now in October of the previous year, when through a series of events that have certainly were none of my fault, I found myself without a job, without an apartment, without family members who wanted to have anything to do with me. Thank God. They had gotten tired enough of my nonsense and had come to the decision that they were probably helping me kill myself and didn't want to do that anymore. And so they said, you're on your own. And now that's what I had always wanted. See, my philosophy as a drinker had been, I demand the right to do it my way, and I demand that you be there to clean it up for me after I've done it my way. And they stopped buying that. Now, with this young lady, she had an apartment and she took me in. Now, she was living with her family, and her family kind of liked that too, because her father was a guy who'd had 3 daughters. He was a drunk. He had no one to play with. And he and I were perfect mates. And we would go out and play. And occasionally I'd have a nocturnal visit from his daughter, which I was one of those in my neighborhood. They were referred to as Irish queers. An Irish queer was a guy who preferred women to whiskey. And my sex life was zip. I'm talking about zip. It's one of God's gifts that I don't wear a hearing aid today. But one of the reasons is women that I'd gone out with just objected to waking up wet on in the morning. And what the hell if they... Because in addition to being an alcoholic and a lunatic, I was also a chronic bedwetter to the day that I got to this program. You know, what the hell, they don't make jockey shorts size 32, you know, with a rubber lined. And so, he and I were great drinking buddies, and things were getting along, and I thought, well, this is just a nice, comfortable arrangement here. They don't ask me for rent, they cook my meals, I have a drinking partner, picks up the tabs, and one night we were out drinking, and this guy Harold said, drinks for everyone, and I thought, terrific, we're going to have a party. And he said, to my future son-in-law, and I thought, Jesus, is he here too? Who's he talking about, you know? It was me, and I did the thing that we have all learned how to do so well, the phantom routine. We can disappear before your eyes. You know, the book says that we intuitively learn how to handle situations which used to baffle us. Gone. And I did that. And I went off on a bender and came back about 3 weeks later, and I was sitting on the edge of the bed at about 5 o'clock in the morning wearing the same clothes that I had on when I left. And there was Harold, 5 in the morning. He's sitting there with 2 drinks, one for him and one for me. And he said, you know, kid, we got a problem. I said, what are you talking about? He said, the women, they think you drink too much. I said, no. He said, yeah. He said, but don't worry about it. A couple of years ago, they thought I had a problem too. And I said the only thing that was ever an honest question on my part at a time like that, I said, how did you get off the hook? That's all I wanted to know. And before he got the words out, I knew what he was going to say, because about 2 years before, my mother had been captured by Alcoholics Anonymous. In our family, we don't surrender either, Jim. We get captured. And she had gone into AA, and she was trying to maneuver me in a very subtle way into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I wasn't buying it. You know, I'd go up to the house, and all the reading material had been taken out of the room, except one thing, the big book. Yeah? And it weighed about 6 times its normal weight because of paper clips she put in pages that she considered appropriate for me. Or she'd say, now, the first time that I found out she was in AA, she said, don't let it bother you, help yourself, you know where the liquor cabinet is. And I thought, good deal, all right. And I went and I poured myself a good stiff wild turkey because it was on their money. And I went to put it down. She said, wait, I just fixed that coffee table, let me get you a coaster. And she brought me the coaster, which was 20 questions, are you an alcoholic? Subtle stuff like that. And that's not the way to get me or any alcoholic to move. You know, I'm just not going to do it. You know, when we read in chapter 5, that one line, I think we should change the inflection. It says, what an order, I can't go through with it. I don't think it should be read that way. It should be what? An order? I can't go through with it. Yeah? Because I'm not going to do anything you tell me to do. In fact, but if you show me and say, do what I'm doing, now we've got something working. Now we've got something to deal with. And that's exactly what eventually happened. But not right then, because when Harold said, then I went to AA for a couple of meetings, and those guys gave me a lot of love, and they told me how to get off the hook, and everything was fine. And I thought, well, maybe I should do that. And so I put on the suit. You know, every alcoholic, every guy has the suit, which we wear for court appearances and for numerous job interviews. And because as long as I have the suit, I'm not an alcoholic, and I look respectable. Look respectable. That's important to an alcoholic. Feel like hell. Look respectable. There's a club down in Santa Monica, 26th and Broadway, had a great want ad up on the bulletin board a couple of years ago, said, AA car, AA newcomer car for sale. Outside in great shape, inside needs work. Right? So I got on the suit, and I went to this place where the meeting was going to be held, and there was a god-awful gray shirt board on the door that some poor inmate had written AA on, and I was appalled. And I walked down the steps waiting to get all this love and affection that I was supposed to get. And I walked into a room, one of those basements that only Presbyterians know how to build. And it was the grimmest, most depressing thing I have ever seen in my life. You know, the walls were gray, the chairs were gray, the men were gray, everything. And I took one look and I knew it wasn't Boys Town, and I had no future here. But I had to get off the hook. And I walked across that meeting room floor, and there was a rectangular table set up in the middle, and about 12 guys sat there just watching me. Not a word. All I could hear was the sound of arteries hardening. They just watched me. They looked like an oil painting, you know, staring at me. And one guy croaked at me, not even a voice. It was gave you shivers. He said, "Hello, you bum. We've been waiting for you." And I looked around. I thought someone must have been behind me, see? And I had a tremendous resentment against this guy until some time later when I realized that he knew exactly what he was talking about and he knew what he was looking at, because in Alcoholics Anonymous, when you stick around here for a while, you look past the package and you see the product. The outside doesn't make a damn bit of difference. You look in the eyes. That's where it is. And they just took one look and they saw that terror. We heard a speaker a few weeks ago who described that newcomer look. He said he hadn't seen eyes like that since the last time that he saw a dog running loose on the freeway. You know, that stark terror, you know? At the same time, trying to be very much in control. And I sat down, and they did something that I love, and I try to do it now when I'm at a discussion meeting and new people are there, particularly for their first meeting. They made it a beginner meeting, and they got very basic and very fundamental. And they started saying things that obviously they needed some assistance from me, because I was the only one at the table that had a college degree at that point. And so I began to interject to straighten them out on one point. And the guy that I was sitting across from put his hand up and said, "Hold it, I think it's trying to talk or something." You know? And he said, "You got something to say?" I said, "Yes, what you're saying." He said, "Hold it a second, let's get some ground rules straight around here. For the first 90 days around here, the only time you open your mouth is to put coffee in it, because you don't know nothing." I want to tell you, that may seem like a tough shot, but I watch now, and I go to some meetings. I go to one meeting in particular where we insist that newcomers get up the first time around. And they don't know what the hell to say. And they can't sit and relax and listen to what's being said. They can't profit from perhaps what's coming from the podium, because they're trying to think, "Oh my God, what if I get called on? Am I next?" And what the hell are they going to say? Burp? You know? Because I don't care what you have. Who are you looking for? Is he okay? I get the feeling that... Any minute now. Honey, go get the car, would you please? And I think it's a terrible injustice that we do. And they gave me a great gift in allowing me to just sit and get a free ride for 90 days, and to listen, and to just kind of catch my breath, because everybody out there wanted answers from me, and I was fresh out. And yet I must confess that they were talking in those days about being sober a day at a time on an all-time basis. And that scared the bejesus out of me, because at the age of 25, I was not going to look ahead. Now, I mean, if I was as old as they were, different story. Some of those guys were as old as 40 and 45. Right? Hey. And I figured if I get as old as they are, I'll knock it off then, because a good stiff drink could put them right out, as old as they are. Some of these guys had actually been in jail, for God's sake. Some of them had been derelict. Some of them had DTs and convulsions. And what am I doing here with these people? All I want to do is get off the hook. But I'm too much of a phony to say, "Hey, wait a second, you guys, don't waste your time on me. I just came here to get off the hook, to get the heat off. So leave me the hell alone, will you? And as soon as I find a logical explanation why this thing doesn't work, I'll be gone, and you can get about the business of doing what you're doing." And a group came in, and they mentioned two lovely words. In our area back in New York, a speaker meeting means that my group sends a speaker and two speakers and a leader out to your group, and a couple of weeks later, your group retaliates or responds or reciprocates. And they had a speaker come in, and he said two words that I really picked up on, and he said, "resentment" and "slip." And I thought, all right, so that's how it works. I'm no dummy. If I can get a resentment, I can have a slip. Makes sense to me. Now, how do I get a slip? Now, that's not easy, because you know, when you're new, everyone in your family, everyone that you work with, tiptoes around you like you're unstable dynamite. Don't say anything to him. He'll go off. Watch it, you know. Make sure his laundry's ready, you know. Is your coffee hot, dear? Is everything all right? You know. Because they know the moment, what do you mean my handkerchiefs are, my socks aren't starched? How come? I'm gone. And so it's not easy to set up a resentment, but I did it. I made about 5 long-distance phone calls to my mother, and kept on. Those of you who have kids know you can be sober 1,000 years and you can be a saint every place else, but your kids remember. They just file it away. Well, like we tell newcomers, don't throw anything away, just store it. Someday it'll come in handy. The kids know that. And they just file it away because those are AA trading stamps, right? And someday later on, they're just going to jack you up like a cheap car with that, you know, remember when? And that's what I did with sweet old, dignified, lovely, refined mama. And she wasn't going for it because her sponsor said, this turkey's just trying to get off the hook. Don't respond. The fifth call, I got her. Really got her. And my very dignified, refined mother said to me, go piss up a rope. And if my own mother would say that, I know I have a resentment. And so I went out. And the first thing that I needed to prove was that this crap about the first drink was just that, crap. And I went to my local spot, and I said the usual, Tony. And he came down, and he brought me a Boilermaker, and I put it down. He said, do it again. I said, no, I'm just having one. And I looked in the mirror, and I was waiting for the mouth to start to foam and fang teeth to come out. And nothing. And I went home, and I said to this poor wretch that I had married, now she's at home like that after a couple of months. I said, you never guess what I've just done. She said, what? I said, I just had one drink. Am I not okay? She said, you seem to be. I said, there you go. Those guys at Parkchester Group are full of crap. First drink doesn't mean a thing with my capacity. I'm not an alcoholic. I went to work the next day, went to work the day after that. For 3 days, not a thought of a drink. Coming home on the subway, got hot. Very hot for February. In New York. And I said to myself, you know, if you were really an alcoholic for these last 3 days, you'd have been thinking about nothing but that first drink, and you haven't even thought about it. Hot night like tonight, you're not alcoholic, let's have a couple with the guys. And at the foot of the subway station, I stopped in, and I had that Thursday night, I had a couple. And when I got home on Tuesday, she had lost, her sense of humor had gone to hell. And between February and July, when I came back to you, I had been a member of the Yet Set. See, those things that these other fellas had done, like being in jail and sleeping in the great outdoors, no backpackers in the Bronx, DTs and convulsions, I hadn't experienced those yet, but I got to experience them in that period of time. It all came together just like that. I can't demonstrate it on an intellectual level the way most of us like it demonstrated, but experientially I can tell you that what happens after somebody's been around AA, we come into AA and our drinking and our life story is going like this, downhill, and we get to AA and then we go out again and suddenly it's like that. The progression just picks up momentum. AA really screws it up. And I was off and running. And I wound up sleeping this time of year in 1962. I was in residence in a little stretch of beach in the Bronx. That was my home. And I was standing and living in the middle of my wardrobe, which consisted of a pair of khaki walking shorts and a nondescript kind of a button-down shirt. And I didn't change, and I was walking around with everything in those pants that I owned. Everything. Many things that I didn't want to own, but they were there. I didn't have bus fare, but if I had, I'd have had no trouble getting a seat, I can tell you that. It was, as the nurses say, I was incontinent of bowel and bladder, let's put it that way. And I decided I was going to give AA another shot because I knew damn well that I wasn't going to make it. The convulsions were just getting rougher and rougher. When I came back in AA, my last drink was July the 3rd in 1962. I am a little over 6'3", and I weighed 138 pounds. You know, and one of my comments was, I don't want to quit drinking, I'm having too much fun. If I had any more fun, all over with. You know, that summer I'd go to meetings wearing shorts, and guys would grab my ankles and want to make a wish, you know? One of the first meetings back, a guy looked at me who had seen me come around before and didn't think much of my act the first time, took one look at me and he said, was it cold coming out of the ground this morning? You know? And so I found my way back to where my wife was living, my wife at the time, and I told her to call AA, and she said, go to hell, call him yourself. And I called the guy, and I must talk about this because I had my first time around. I wanted to make sure that when I left, you couldn't say to me, but you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And so I got a sponsor. And I got that sponsor by closely examining the 12 guys in that group. 11 of them did hospital institution work, sponsored people, drove wet trunks, had telephone duty down at Intergroup, did it all. One guy, his whole life was passing the basket at the Thursday night speaker meeting. That was it. And I wanted what he had. And I said to him, Ray, will you be my sponsor? He said, all right, okay. I said, what do we do? He said, whatever you want to do. I said, you and me, kid. We got it. So when it really hit the fan, I called Ray, and thanks be to God, Ray was not at home. And his wife said, I'll call some other fellas and send them over. Because I knew, you know how you know when you're about to go into convulsions again. No one has to tell you. And I knew that it was about to hit. And the next thing I know, she had sent 2 guys over who were the resident thugs of the Parkchester group. These were 2 of the all-time step Nazis in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know. God love them. And they started to discuss my body, now on the bed, like I was a slab of veal. And it was like, where do we send it? And I thought, maybe they'll put me in Towns. I couldn't communicate, and I was picking up bits and pieces. And Towns Hospital was the only alcoholism program in New York at that time. And one of them said, are you kidding me? Send him to Towns? You know how much, you know what they're gouging now to put a guy in there for 5 days? For 5 days, they want $125. He's not worth it, yeah. Those of you who just spent 12 grand to puke your way to sobriety, you can... I love the commercial. My wife and I fall on the floor. Tom's problem are that his hands are faster than his reactive mind. Give me another drink, you know. Anyway, we're going to ship the corpse. And they were saying things that I didn't like to hear, like Bellevue. And I didn't want to go to Bellevue under any circumstance. And one of them said, let the bum suffer. He'll remember it better. He was a little guy that had a little DeNobili Italian cigar out of it. I think he was born with that thing. I thought it was a growth. And he muttered things like, wake, wake, wake. And they babysat me for 4.5 days, and they took me through, and they changed my linen, and they did the things that you do for an infant. And I kept thinking, I wonder when they're going to sink in the harpoon and ask me for something. I didn't have a damn thing to give anybody, but I kept wondering, what's their angle? And after 4.5 days, they were there together. One of them worked days, one worked nights. This was a day when they were both off. And they said, you're on your own, kid. This is as good as it gets. We'll see you. And I said, what do I do now? They said, you must know by now. We'll see you. And they left. And I went to the fridge to see if there was something there to get well with. And there wasn't. And I thought, what the hell? Maybe I'll give these guys a try. Because I had to admit that I knew. It was no longer a fear. I knew that I was going to die if I went out again. I just knew it. You don't have a lot of reserve at 138 pounds. And I didn't eat. I never ate. And I drank whatever I could get my hands on. And so I thought I'll go to the meeting tonight and see what happens. But what I really wanted to do was to get this guy who said let the bum suffer and get him. I love it when people come in and they say to me, well, I don't know how I'm ever going to get an amends list. I don't know where I could get a list like that. Every newcomer brings a list in. Every person in this room, when you came in, you had a list of people that you were going to get when you got well. People you were going to get back at when you got well. People who screwed you over when you got well, you get them. That's your amends list. Okay? But that for another time. And I walked into the meeting and I said to this guy that I was going to get, Eddie, will you be my sponsor? And he said, oh. He said, okay, but for the next 90 days, your soul belongs to God, but your ass belongs to me. And every night at 7:30, I want you out on your stoop, and you're going to go where we send you. And this is what I want you to do. I want you to walk into the meeting. You're going to walk up to the program chairman and say, my name is Ken O'Brien. I'm a new member of Alcoholics Anonymous. What can I do to help? And I decided to try him out. And I said, well, look, most of that's okay, but there's one part I heard somebody say it's an anonymous program. I don't have to say my last name. He said, oh, yeah, is that right? He said, I read that too, and it says anonymity in radio, press, and films, and the New York Times ain't going to cover your first 90 days. You tell them your last name. Right, Ed, okay. You know, every now and again you try to probe. You want direction. I know I wanted direction, but I didn't want it to come that easily. I was going to make you earn it. And you had to earn my respect. And every now and again, everybody I know takes a pot shot at their sponsor to see if sponsor really cares enough about me, and I was no different. And at one meeting, after about 90 days of this crap, and I'm, just about getting ready to get rid of the shakes, the inside shakes, they last so much longer than the outside ones. And we had worked our way through the first 3 steps. We had said the 3rd step prayer that's on page 62 in his car, out loud, holding hands, me with a little gnome of a man with a cigar in his mouth, holding hands. I figure the Vice Squad's going to bust us any minute now. And I've about had it. I'm tired with this goddamn meeting stuff. And one night I'm sitting at a meeting and I yawned. And he said, "What's the matter with you?" And I thought, well, here goes. I'm going to try to see if he can handle some honesty. I said, "You want to know what's the matter with me? I'm bored. That's what's the matter with me." How's that grab you, And he said, "Oh, yeah?" He said, you want to know why you're bored? And I thought, wait a minute, maybe he knows something. I said, "Why?" He said, "Because you're boring. That's why you're bored." That hurt. And what he meant was, I've been sitting around on my dead ass taking. Just doing nothing. Doing a few odds and ends, setting up chairs, big deal. But not going out of my way to put anything back in here. I wasn't coming to him and saying, "Ed, when can we work the next step?" It was, "Oh God, here he comes again. Another step must be on the way." Now I want to tell you that's probably the reason that a lot of us people that have been around for a while keep going to so many meetings. I'm not going to leave AA until I've been able to pass on every zinger that I got hit with. So for a lot of years, I waited. I thought, that's a good one, boy. Someday, some newcomer's going to come to me and they're going to say I'm bored and I'm going to level them. And there sits Donna. And we start going out before she was my wife, and we're sitting in a meeting, and she yawned. I got to tell you, I'm waiting 18 years for somebody to yawn. It's got to be her. I thought, what the hell, I'll try it. I said, "What's the matter, honey?" She said, "I'm bored." I thought, thank you, God. Here she is. I said, "Do you know why you're bored?" She said, "Sure, I'm with you." God's honest truth. She was also the one that said to me, I was sitting in a meeting one night, we had driven about 9 hours, and I was supposed to be the speaker, and they spent all but 3 minutes of the meeting handing out 4-minute chips and 2-minute chips and... Christ. They were giving out chips to people in their last 30 days of sobriety, And I said to her, "They didn't give any goddamn chips out when I came in." She said, "They didn't need to give you a chip. They saw the one you had on your shoulder." So Eddie and I proceeded on the road to happy destiny, and I'll tell you what they laid on me, and I want to pass it on if somebody here is new and if someone is thinking that perhaps you're at a crossroads. Because I think when I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, the love in the room and the enthusiasm, and clearly God's grace that fills these rooms, which is what it is that manifests itself as love and enthusiasm and genuine, that's God's grace, just flooding this room. That will carry you along just so far. And all of a sudden, you will come to the point where, having fed on the group's effort, because probably maybe 30% of the people in this room have really worked the steps, and the other 70%, I'd venture to say, are living on the benefits of that 30%'s effort. That's a conservative estimate. And so you can float along on that while everybody else is running around. I don't know, example, if you're sober long enough to work the telephones at your telephone office, if you have one, I'm sure you do, and you're not working the telephones, who the hell are you? If you're sober long enough to be on a 12-step call list and you're not, what are you sitting on? So this is the kind of stuff that somebody's doing, and it's their strength that's creating the grace that allows people to sort of float along here for 30, 60, 90 days, and all of a sudden comes the crossroads. And that's when you say to yourself, do I want to bother with this crap or not? Because I know I'm about ready to drink if I don't, but they're menacing me with this step crap. People are coming at me, and I'm guilty of it. I'll say to newcomers, I don't want any more crap out of you. It's time to get down with your inventory. Let's start working this program and stop talking about it. This is not a program that we can intellectualize our way into or talk our way into. It's an action program. So let's go. Let's get working. And that's when the crossroads hits. And we say, wait a minute. What the hell do I have to work? What is this step crap? What is this, some sort of an AA obstacle course to see if I'm worthy? I got to work the steps? Why? I was fortunate. One fellow, not my sponsor, but another guy, Bart Luby, he's dead now, said to me, look, kid, Alcohol brought you here, but alcoholism is still with you. And it's been with you all your life. And your alcoholism has manifested itself in 3 areas. You have 3 problem areas in your life. And that's why we need the steps. And I said, what are you talking about? He said, you've got relationship problems. And, Jesus, I knew that. But he was talking about something quite different. I said, Bart, what do you mean? He said, well, first off, you have no relationship with God worth speaking of because your whole life is nothing but an example of despair. The fear that I felt, the longing that I felt was born of the feeling that, oh my God, I'm in charge of my life and it's hopeless. If I'm running this show, it's all over because I can't do it. And that was simply a rejection or a denial or ignorance of God's presence and activity in my life at that moment. That's a terrible feeling to think that I'm in charge of my life. And so what he was pointing out is that you have no relationship with God worth talking about at all. So that's relationship problem number 1. We better get on that. And your next relationship problem is with yourself. You don't like you at all. You've got a lousy relationship with yourself. You're trying to kill yourself every time you pick up a drink. And even now you're coming to the decision whether you want to live or die. That, by the way, new folks or old folks who have been ducking and bobbing and weaving and shucking and jiving when it comes to working these steps, that's the decision you're making. Not do I work the steps or not, do I live or do I die? He said, and to make that kind of a differentiation says you don't have any relationship going on with yourself. So that's a second relationship problem. The third is you don't get along with anybody else at all. You have bad relationships with everybody around you. So he said, so there it is, kid. You got 3 problems. It's not too bad. You can't get along with God, yourself, or anybody else. Outside of that, you're fine. Now, at that point, one might be tempted to go down to the bus barn, hook onto an exhaust pipe, inhale deeply, and just leave. Until the good news came in. He said, I'll tell you what, you work those first 3 steps, and you live the knowledge that you have worked those first 3 steps, and you will develop a relationship with God that you will love to have. You work the next 4 steps, and you'll establish a relationship with yourself because you'll get to meet yourself. And you'll get to like yourself. And you work the next 5 steps, and you'll develop a relationship with your fellow man that will enable you to greet each day knowing that you can go out there and do God's work. And life is going to become worthwhile. There's the 12 steps. That's why you have to work the steps. And so we began the job, and I went to Ed and I said, I guess I do want to work those steps. Let's get going. And he told me how to write my inventory, and he told me exactly how he wanted me to do it, and I did it. And I didn't want to give it up. Did you ever watch, you wait and you work with somebody for a long time and you finally get them into a corner and you get them to write their inventory and they're smart. Once they start, they never want to stop. Because the moment they stop, they know they're going to have to talk to somebody about it. So guys that I work with get 12 days to write it. That's all. 12 days, and after that, you're lying anyway. Okay? And I don't want inventories that are written in the dark hours, 1, 2, and 3 a.m. in the morning, when everything is morose and god-awful and terminal. You know, I'm tired of looking at those inventories with bloodstains on them. You know? Teardrops all over them. And so I worked that inventory the way he told me to, and I shared it with him, and Eddie read it in that same beat-up old Buick under the street light, and he said, no big deal. He said, you're a candy ass. No big deal. You hang around pretty good, which meant keep coming back. And then from that, while I was reading my inventory, he was taking notes, and I thought, well, maybe I'll get a little breather. And he handed me a piece of paper. He said, here are your character defects. That's what we got to work on. That came right off my inventory. Amazing. I thought he was writing down things that he was going to tell other people about me. And he was simply writing down 2 things. He had one column of my character defects, and another column was my 8th step, my amends list. He pulled it right off my inventory. No big deal. And then after a while, we said that 7-step prayer on page 76, back in the car, holding hands out loud. And suddenly I began to feel as though I were really a part of AA, because I had done the things that other people had done. Any of you ever get the feeling, you walk in tonight, and this place was a beehive of activity. Don't you love it? We all get up here and say, I'm an introvert. And tonight, there were 300 people talking simultaneously. Nobody listens. All introverts talking away, right? And yet you come into a room like this, and you see the love, and you see God's grace working in the room, and you say, boy, I want to be a part of that. And they think I'm a part of it, but I kind of feel like I'm not. I sort of feel like I'm out here somewhere. I promise you that if you feel that sort of disconnected feeling, the moment that you begin to do the things that need to get done And by that, I'm talking about a spoken third, fifth, seventh, and ninth step, and a written fourth, sixth, and eighth step written. You will begin to feel a part of this just like that. You'll know you're home, you'll know you belong. And that's the feeling that I got. But I did not want to plunge ahead into my eighth step because I knew it was ready for me and I'd have to go out and start talking to people that I had been trying to duck. Shylocks and people like that who don't take kindly to lame, wimp excuses. And so I decided to just dodge a little bit. And one night, a fellow named Larry Bass came up to me and he said, we're a little bit overextended on our meeting commitments and we want you to handle a speakers meeting not with two other guys, but by yourself. And I thought, all right, they finally recognized, huh? Turned me loose. And they sent me to a place called North Tarrytown. They said the format is you will qualify for 20 minutes and then you'll handle questions from the audience. And I thought, as it should be. And I got up there, and it was a group that looked a lot like my home group. And I started talking, and after about 5 minutes, a guy in the front row said, what the hell are you doing here? And I looked around for the group to shut him up, and no one did. And so I thought, well, he must be one of those wet brains they told me about. And I kept on talking, and he said again, I said, what are you doing here? And I thought, I better deal with this clown. And I said, I'm your speaker. This is my 12-step work. Being as patient as I could with this poor ninny. And he said, what's the 12-step say? And I began to feel like a trap was closing around me. And I said, well, somebody hand me the book, because I didn't know, I knew it had something to do with talking. I favored not doing. And I read to him patiently as one would to a child. I said, having had a spiritual relationship awakening as a result of these steps, he said, hold it right there. What steps? And I thought, oh God, I'm had. I said, the other steps. He said, how many other steps? I said, I guess all the. Did you work all the other steps? I said, well, not all of them, but most of them. He said, well, we have. Why don't you sit down and listen and we'll talk? And I looked around at the rest of the group and they were kind of looking at me like, there's an idea. You know? Well, O'Brien wrapped it up a little early that night. And I got in the car and I broke the land speed record getting down to where my home group was hanging out, which is a coffee house, the Chester House Lounge, to tell him to report North Tarrytown to the vice president of AA in charge of Westchester County for what they had done to me. And I went flying in that door. Those guys told me that I looked like an eggplant when I came in. I was furious. And I didn't have to tell them anything. They knew everything that had happened. See, the reason they knew everything is because they saw me dragging my feet a few weeks before, and my sponsor called up North Tarrytown. And he said, we got some fresh meat for you. How would you like to do an egoectomy? And the old wet brain that was in the front, and this is 1962, and this guy then was sober for 20 years. That's the only thing that got this guy out of the house was egoectomies. That's how he got his jollies at 20 years. He'd sit home unless they had some poor boob up there to make a spectacle of himself. Then he'd come out there, what are you talking about? And they'd pack him in the car and put him on ice and send him back home again. But I'll tell you what that did to me. They recognized there was one thing that I had left when I came in here, and I had it abundant in quantity, and that was ego. And they thought if nothing else works to get this guy off the dime and get him hungry for sobriety. Now, I'm not talking about being led along from step to step in a resigned kind of fashion that says, okay, what's next? Okay, what's next? They wanted me to be as enthusiastic for sobriety as I used to be for the next drink. And that is, to this day, my mark for someone who's, people say, how's so-and-so doing, or how am I doing? And I'll say to a guy, if I see you chasing after the newest newcomer wet drunk at a meeting the way you chase after an agent to get your next job, then I'll know you're on the road to something. But until then, I don't see it. And that's what these people were trying to do to me, and so they got me right in the ego. And I decided at that meeting that the next time that someone mentioned the steps of recovery, I would know from firsthand experience exactly what they were about. I'll show them, I'll work those damn steps, and I got sober at them. Because I believe there's a tremendous difference between simply, look, I care too much about the drunk to try to BS you. If you're just hanging around at meetings and not drinking, you're not sober. At best, you're abstinent, you're dry. and your disease continues to progress, and we know it. Sobriety comes when you work the steps. Sobriety comes when you don't take that first drink and you go to meetings and you take direction which leads you through the steps. Again, a spoken third, fifth, seventh, ninth, personally, a written fourth, sixth, and eighth. That's sobriety. And you don't take your first drink while you're doing that. And that's when sobriety comes. But until then, it's dry. And too often, we watch people in this fellowship, and we know damn well that somebody's on the road that's leading them right back out the door again. Because they're ducking and bobbing and weaving, and they're setting themselves up for the next one. And we've gotten so goddamn sophisticated in Alcoholics Anonymous that we say, well, I'm no guru. I don't have the right to tell him anything. He's got to work his own program. What crap. It's almost like we'd say, well, listen, I don't want to hurt your feelings, so I'm just going to let you die. And alcoholics die. And those of us who know better have an obligation to say, come here. Don't die. I love you. I don't want you to die. I've been in this fellowship I'll be sober in about 2 weeks. I'll be sober 21 years, and I've gone to too damn many funerals. And I'm not going to say, God willing, I'll be sober 21 years. That's the most ludicrous thing I've ever heard. If I'm alive, I'm going to be sober. I can't see God sitting up there saying, I think I'll get O'Brien drunk this week. And the funerals that I've gone to, some of them were necessary, because not everyone gets sober. If everyone got this program and got sober, then we wouldn't be able to talk about the gift of sobriety. It would be the right of sobriety. And sobriety is not a right, it's a gift. My introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous was a God-given gift. The free ride stopped when I came in the door. And from there on out, it's been a grant. I meet God halfway. I do a little, he does a lot more. I do a little, but I have to keep doing. Okay? But it is a grant, and I don't coast, and I can't coast. And the moment that I think that I have this thing locked, or the moment that you think you have this thing locked, there's a scientific word, there's a medical term that applies to you. It's called drunk. And they come in all shapes, sizes, economic status, alcoholism is an equal opportunity destroyer. It and God doesn't care what's on your W-2 form. It's going to kill you anyway. And this is our gift. This Alcoholics Anonymous is our gift. It was passed on to us, grace of God, by people who really cared. Let's not get so damn sophisticated that we forget. There's a price to pay for sobriety. It's called the steps. It's called service. That there is a glue that holds us together. It's called our traditions. And each group does have but one primary purpose, and all the rest is BS. That's to carry this message to the alcoholic that still suffers. A number of years ago, I did a workshop in, it was Brentwood. And there were about 600 people in the room. And we talked about service, and there were a lot of questions about working with the newcomer and working with one another. And everybody walked out of that room feeling great. And I was one of the last people to leave. 600 people left that hall. And as I got outside with 2 or 3 other people, there was a fellow lying right outside the door in the weeds. He had been there all night long. And 600 of us walked by him. No doubt carrying our spiritual message was such a weighty burden that we couldn't stop and pick up one of our brothers who was loaded in the weeds. Let's not forget that that's why we're here. Social sobriety is marvelous, but you know what? I noticed that when the crap hits the fan, the specialists in social sobriety don't get the phone calls at 3 in the morning. It's the step Nazis. It's the people who care enough about us to tell us the truth. Those are the people that I want to be with. I want to be around people who care enough about me to run the risk of my displeasure by telling me the truth. It's really been a privilege for me to be back up here tonight, and I know that Phil and Vicki had a hand in this, and to Kathy and Jim and Madonna and Bernie and Carol and all of you. Thank you so very much for having us up here. We've loved it. Thank you. God bless you.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I don't not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.